Hello everyone. Today I want to give you a bit of a quick start guide to watercolor paper. I'm going to try to quickly give you an overview of some of the different papers you can choose so that by the end of this video you have a pretty good idea of what to go pick out at the store for your next project where you're going to be painting with watercolor. Alright guys, like I said in the intro, this is going to be a quick start guide. So I am not going to go super into depth about like watercolor paper, how it's made, why and what not and wherefores about it, but I did find a really great watercolor paper article just by Googling, and I'm going to post that below for you. I don't have any affiliation with the person that wrote the article. I just thought it was really good. So if you want to find out more after this video, you can click on that link and read this. Then also, if you enjoy this video, if the information is great, don't forget to subscribe to this channel so you can get more great information, and also like the video. Okay, so let's get started. I think that the first thing you want to keep in mind when you're planning to paint something or planning to use watercolor paper is what you're going to use it for. So if you're going to be doing some quick sketches or fun little studies, then you're going to want maybe something different than like the more expensive artist grade paper. But if you're going to be doing a complicated painting, you're going to want to go with the more expensive stuff. So I'll kind of talk about what those differences in a minute. But let's talk about kind of how you can buy watercolor paper, how they come. So the first thing is, a lot of people, like my art students especially, so when you go to a craft store and you're looking for a paper, it's going to come in a pad like this. This is kind of how people think of it, and this is usually what I see students bringing in when they want to start watercolor paper. So there's watercolor pads. They have their place, but there's better. So we'll get to that in a second. Another way you can buy watercolor paper is in a watercolor block, and this is just paper and it's kind of glued down to like hard cardboard block, and it's nice for doing sketches and stuff because the paper is stuck down, and then you can peel it up, and it has like sheets of watercolor paper that peel up, so you don't have to tape it down to a surface or something. So this is really great for like on the go or just for having fun. And then the other way that you can get watercolor paper is in these giant sheets. So you probably can't even see the whole sheet. It's pretty big, and I think that this is kind of intimidating for a lot of people, and so they don't get it. They go for these notebook pads of watercolor paper first. So let's talk about why you would want to pick the different things. So I already said, like, watercolor blocks are great for like on the go sketching. Also, if you get a good quality one, you can still do like some really nice paintings on here. They just don't usually come very large, so if you want to work large, watercolor block might not be for you. But they do come in different sizes, so you can check that out, watercolor block. So watercolor sheets, they are good, and this brand is Arches, and Arches is a really good brand. It's probably the main watercolor paper brand, and there's other really good brands. And but the thing that you want to look for if you are going to get a watercolor sheet to work on, and it usually is cheaper to get it in a sheet, well, sort of, not exactly. It looks cheaper, but it's kind of not. It just depends. Okay, but you want to look for paper that is 100% pure cotton, and handmade is really good, and also artist grade paper, because there are a lot of watercolor papers that are a lower grade, and you're gonna get frustrated painting on those because they just don't take the paint as well. They're not as nice. So if you want to do a more comprehensive painting, but you don't want to buy this huge sheet, hopefully in a second I might convince you that you will. But these are good, and this paper is what I did this painting on. So it works. It took the paint nice and it worked really good. But yeah, so that isn't to say that if you just want to do some experimenting and see, you can get the cheaper paper, you can try sketching on it and stuff like that. But if you find yourself getting frustrated, it might be your paper giving you issues. One thing that I've noticed with helping my art students when they buy cheaper papers is like it just doesn't soak in the paint as well, so it feels like it's kind of floating on the surface, and it'll kind of lift up when you especially get darker and darker with your paint. So that can get kind of frustrating. So look for a higher quality paper, especially if you're going to be doing a painting that's, you know, more comprehensive than just a sketch. Okay, so these sheets that I already showed you once, I'll show you again. They are usually handmade. They're super nice. They have this decal edge that is pretty. And I think that it's intimidating because it's this giant sheet and you think, oh, I don't want to do a giant painting, I'll get one of the pads. But obviously you can cut this up to the sizes that you need it to be cut up to make your painting. And what you want to do though, if you're cutting a watercolor sheet, is probably do a nice straight kind of tear of it, just because it saves that pretty edge and you're gonna have a really nice painting at the end. So the sheets are nice because you can pick different sizes. So you get that sheet, it seems like they're usually around $8, and you go, that's a lot, could be more, could be less. But really, if you're doing smaller paintings, you're gonna get a lot of paintings out of that $8. Whereas, you know, watercolor pads are usually around, you know, 15, 20, maybe more for the higher quality papers. And anyway, so you'll just have to do some price comparison. But the sheets are really great, and I pretty much always use them if I am doing any kind of serious painting. Okay, so hopefully that helped you out and wasn't too confusing. All right, so the next thing you need to know about watercolor paper is it comes with different surfaces. So there is hot press, cold press, and rough paper. Hot press paper is smooth, cold press paper has a little bit of a texture, and rough paper has a lot of a texture. So depending on what you want to create, you're gonna wanna pick different papers. Hot press is really versatile. It's good for doing paintings on, and I know a lot of professional watercolorists that use it exclusively just for their paintings. I am an illustrator, so I usually use hot press when I want to create something multimedia, like if I'm going to do watercolor with pen or watercolor with colored pencil on the top. I pick the nice smooth paper because it takes that extra media really well. So here's an example of a painting where I used pen to draw these mermaids, and then okay, I know I'm gonna get questions. I didn't draw them with pen, I drew them with pencil and then with pen, but I did the ink on here and then I did the paintings, and it works really good on the hot press paper because it's nice and smooth. Here's another example of a hot press painting. This one doesn't have any multimedia, it's just a watercolor. This was for my Beauty and the Beast Tales Fantastic story, which you can read on talesfantastic.com. Shameless plug. Okay, so this painting is also on hot press paper. You can see the hot press takes the color really well, and it makes nice bright colors and dark colors, which is something that if you get a lower quality paper, you're not going to get. Now, cold press paper has a little bit of a texture, and so I don't usually use it if I'm gonna do multimedia. Every once in a while, maybe if at the end I'm like, oh, I should totally do some pen on this, even though it's cold press, maybe I do that. But usually if I'm planning ahead, I'm gonna use hot press for multimedia stuff. Cold press is really great for, it's just a great paper for paintings. So this painting Cherry Blossom Girl is from another Tales Fantastic story, and I knew that I wanted to have kind of that real watercolor feel to it. You know how when you think of watercolors, you think of that sort of ethereal magic look. And so I picked this, and it has a bit of a texture, so when you probably, like, it probably won't even show you the difference, but it's just nice to paint on that extra texture, and it's also a little bit different working on this surface than working on the hot press. So I recommend experimenting and seeing what you like. This is another painting that I did on cold press. So this one's really similar to the Beauty and the Beast one that I just showed you, because it has all of these objects and glowing fire or whatever. And it's on cold press. So you can see you can get similar results sometimes with the different papers, but they do act differently. So just try something different. I don't have any examples of rough watercolor paper because I just don't ever use it. But if you're looking to do something really experimental or with a lot of texture or really impressionist or something, you might want to try out the rough paper. Okay, so that's watercolor paper surfaces. Next, you need to know that watercolor paper comes in different weights. So I personally have used 90-pound paper, 140-pound paper, and 300-pound paper. If you're just starting out, get 140-pound paper. It's a perfect in between. All of these paintings are on 140-pound paper. It's probably the most popular, and it does really well taking all the color, but it's not too light. I used 90-pound paper back a long time ago, when I would try to put it through the printer, and it still worked pretty good, and it's definitely going to be cheaper, but you might not want to have that if you're going to do a really in-depth painting. It's probably good again for maybe doing sketches and stuff like that. And then 300-pound paper is beautiful, fabulous paper. It's stiff, so like usually you can break it. It's very thick, and it's very nice for doing really great masterpiece watercolor paintings. But I don't know that many people, or I haven't heard of that many people that use it regularly. There probably are artists that love it. It definitely isn't gonna buckle as much as these 140-pound paper is gonna buckle. So it's gonna be a little bit smoother surface. But if you tape your paper down or stretch it really good, you're going to be fine, probably. So stick with 140-pound for now, and you can experiment later if you like. Okay, so I think that that's a pretty good overview of the paper, and I just wanted to show you a couple more examples here at the end, and then if you guys have any questions or I didn't explain something thoroughly, go ahead and post it in the comments below, and also tell me if you like this video or if you have any other questions maybe related to watercolors or drawing, and I can make videos about that too. Okay, so the last few examples, I just wanted to show you kind of the difference between using paper that isn't for watercolor and watercolor paper. So I have an example here of this in this sketchbook. I like to do some watercolor sketching. In this sketchbook, the paper itself is not watercolor paper, it's drawing paper. It's a little bit thicker, so it takes the watercolor well, but not as well as watercolor paper. So so I did this painting. Let's get this out of the way. I did this painting just of some flowers just for fun. It was just a sketch, and anyway, it turned out pretty good on this paper, probably as good as it could have. But then I have this other sketchbook. So, okay, this sketchbook is a handbook sketchbook. See that there? And I love it. I love it for doing sketches. I love it it's great for drawing. So it's a nice versatile one for me that I keep buying over and over. But then I have this sketchbook that's a Stillman and Byrne sketchbook and Delta series, and it has a multimedia paper in it, so it's meant to be used a little more for wet media, but so here's a flower painting I did just again for fun on that one. There's stuff falling out the side over here. So you can look at this and see the difference between this like thicker multimedia paper and this. Can you see just the colors are brighter. I didn't have to work as hard to get this result as I did to get this that isn't quite as dark and nice. Especially like look at the pinks. You can see that the pinks on this guy, see my finger wiggling, are brighter and nicer than these. So these are both, this one is just a drawing paper. It's not as good for watercolor paper. You can still do it, but you know, keep in mind what you're doing it for. This is a multimedia paper. It works pretty good. I've been pretty happy with how this works. But when you compare it with just this, so these flowers, can you see the difference in like just the brightness and the texture? It just flows better on these watercolor papers. That's something that you might have to experiment and try on your own to really get the feel of that. But I just wanted to show you that just so you know, because if you're starting out or you're just experimenting with watercolors, you might have some frustrations, and it could be related to your materials rather than you know, you as you personally. So anyway, that is all I have about watercolor paper. I hope it was useful and helpful and gives you a good start. Again, feel free to ask me any questions you have about watercolor, and like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you want to see more. All right, thanks so much for watching. Bye.